Batgirl, issue 8, Tate Brombal writing with ISAAC GOODHART on the art. Saying that after the name Goodhart, it rhymes too much. I feel like I'm saying something silly, but it's fine. So we're doing the second part of the Book of Shiva. This was one that I was a little disappointed in last month. I think the first issue of this was a little overly wordy. I didn't think the story with Shiva was, it was all right, but it didn't. I didn't really find it that compelling. Connor felt pretty similar. I do think, while I still am excited to go back to it just being Cassie's book again, I do think this is a better chapter. I think this chapter of Shiva's story was more inherently interesting than all the stuff about living in the temple with the monks and like the uncle showing up to kill people and all that.
Yeah, I did that, but this felt like an Arrow would introduce characters, right? And you're going through the history, and there's like a WB-ification of Shiva's origin here. And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I couldn't help. But I felt like I was back in those Arrow days, where just kind of clumsy, and some of the stuff that is being handled. That said, I like where it goes, because at the end of the story, I felt like the reason that we were told this is because of, what had unfolded in this issue. And like you said, I did like the last issue, I think, more than you and Connor, right? Because I like that kind of, vibe in the story. But this one, it just felt like, okay, this is why we're doing this, because the character that gets introduced through here. But yeah, it definitely was a mixed bag, I think, these last two issues. So
I just think this one flowed much better. I think I got more into like what the relationship between her and her sister was. It was a lot more easier to sort of like, the comparison to Arrow was weird to me, because I think this is way better written than anything that Arrow ever had.
Yeah, but like what I talk about when they introduced what is it, the two guys,
Bronze Tiger,
Richard and Ben. Yeah, and Richard Dragon, and right there, and just putting them in their origins, and then it almost gives them to a kind of, it's in Marvel, but Heroes for Hire. They almost felt like a Luke Cage and Iron Fist type, and then you have the two others, or like Misty and Colleen and stuff, and it just, just the way that was all handled, it was very clumsy, I think. So, but I do like where it ends up with Bronze Tiger and Shiva, their connection because of the events that happen, right?
Yeah, I just don't think I agree that it feels clumsy to me. Maybe it's just because I don't have like a good footing of knowledge of what Shiva's origin was supposed to be before this, but
well, it's not even just that. It's just with the way that they're in, like, it's not a circus, but like the show fights, and they come through, and and then they're off doing things with the two guys, and it was just, again, it just felt weird. This is the direction that we're going with Shiva's origin. Because I don't get that from the world's greatest fighter. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I honestly don't know what you're getting at, to be honest. I guess I just disagree.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I didn't enjoy it as much as the last one with their.
I mean, that's fine if you didn't enjoy it.
I
nothing about this rings weird to me. Her being a fighter with her sister, meeting these two guys, her sister being open to the idea of a relationship and wanting to let go of the vengeance and all that, whereas Shiva's like dead set, she wants her vengeance on the uncle for from their childhood. And there's some fun sequences when they fight the two guys in the ring when they first meet, and it's kind of how they hit it off, because there's kind of a playfulness to it. It was a good 2-page layout. I think the art did a decent job selling me on that. I think because the two sisters are more defined in terms of character at this point, it was always clear to me which one was which. It felt like they had good, strong personalities now. Whereas in the first issue, last time, because they were kind of developing some of that stuff, it felt like they were just like two girls for a while. And it was kind of, whereas here they're a bit more defined. So it's like, okay, Shiva's the one who's kind of antisocial, doesn't want to mingle, with a couple of guys. And I think some of that is I don't know. I found it a bit more compelling and a bit more interesting. Them being a little team of heroes effectively for a bit was interesting. I certainly didn't know about that, if it was already in canon anyway.
Yeah.
So, but this idea that Shiva's still having these nightmares of like her inner like beast or whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure what you would call it, but this all leading to Kane showing up, David Kane. It's got to be Kane. Like his like.
So I'm not that familiar with him, so I always pictured him differently. Him just showing out of the shadows like a super creep, and essentially having a plan that's very similar to what was that movie? Don't Breathe.
I mean, sure. I mean, you're spoiling that movie,
yeah,
because that's like revealed later on. So
my bad, guys. But yeah. I was like, okay, this is again, I'm not that familiar with David Kane, and like I can't. If I've read Batgirl, it's only 1 or 2 issues here and there, the original cast stuff. So him just showing up out of the shadows like this, I was like, okay, this is definitely weird. And yeah, he definitely gave me creep vibes, which is good. I guess that's what's intended, right?
Sure. Yeah, I was fine with that. Admittedly, I don't really remember how he was portrayed back in the original cast book. I read like the first 20, so I should. It's a run that I really want to go back and read all of at some point.
Yeah.
But I think this idea here that this isn't some romance that blossoms between Shiva and Kane. In fact, by the end of this issue, she wants revenge on him. So we'll see how it gets to Caspian Born in a bit. But he basically propositions with, "Hey, I've been trying to create the perfect weapon, but it turns out the stock is important," and he touches her stomach as he says this to basically imply, "I want you to bear my child, my ultimate weapon." It's super creepy, and it says something in a scene. Not that I feared for her safety because she's Shiva and she kicked the shit out of him, but it says something that I'm watching a scene or reading a scene with Shiva, and someone does something that's so creepy that I'm like, oh god, Shiva, get out of there! Like I'm actually like feeling weirded out on her behalf.
Don't let him get close. He's too close. Yeah,
but make him put that concealed weapon away. Come on.
Yeah, I don't think he has a license for that concealed weapon.
So yeah, but the big ending though is that he basically says, "Oh, I've already went to speak to your sister." So Shiva like obviously worries, runs back, and discovers that her sister's lying dead in her bed, covered in blood. And her assumption here is that Kane killed her, and I mean I don't have much reason to think otherwise at this point either. Which definitely leads to the questions of like how we end up in, because this does kind of feel like maybe we're kind of establishing what the current continuity is of like how we get to the birth of Cassandra Cain, and that's cool. It's cool to do that. I do kind of wish that I was more memorable or whatever about the original Batgirl Cassandra Cain run, just so I knew what they'd changed here. But I mean, I thought this was compelling enough. I thought it was an interesting cliffhanger. And we kind of find out that the reason why Cass is on the train at the end is because Shiva says in the diary to go see Bronze Tiger because he can help you. So
yeah, and just the way with Bronze Tiger, he had a relationship with Shiva's sister.
Yes,
right? They were actively dating. So bringing him in on this and why he's still an ally of Shiva, like they have this bond. Over the loss of Carolyn.
Is so naive because when they're like having sex for the first time in the room, she's outside the door going, "They've been in there for an hour. What are they doing?" And like the other guy's like, let's just go and trade or something."
Yeah, Richard Dragon's a good friend, man. He is not blocking. He's helping his bro.
I mean, he makes it very clear that he's into Shiva, but Shiva just is not, like.
There's no time for relationships when you're only thinking of vengeance. All right, that might be the only thing she has in common with early Bruce. Yeah,
it's just that gave me a good chuckle. I do like the idea though that maybe like because it's not like she really cares about these two guys up front. Like she's sort of just living like as her sister's like. I mean, Kane even says at one point, "You're your sister's shadow, and you should be unleashed," kind of thing. But I like the idea that she does see Bronze Tiger as maybe an ally is a strong word, but because her sister cared for him and like trusted him, that she inherently also thinks that he's like, if she had to pick someone as an ally, she might pick Bronze Tiger because of this relationship with her sister.
Yeah, they have that bond there, and so and through the years now, right? And Bronze Tiger when he's popped up. you know, you never feel like he's a bad guy, but he also is not a hero. He's very much in the anti-hero.
Yeah.
So you could see him working with Shiva on certain things over the years. That's not outside of the, you know. Yeah, and like what happens there, because he's very bright-eyed, right, as his young self.
Oh yeah.
Up until this moment.
And it's worth mentioning that when they find the sister dead, like he's like yelling, "Who? Give me a name!" Like he wants revenge here. Like he's also pissed off and angry. So maybe they'll even bond as they go together to try and kill the bastard who did this. So, you know, like I think there's some compelling stuff here. And yeah, I genuinely liked this more than the last issue. I thought this was a much more focused chapter of the story. I found the last chapter way more wordy and kind of going through the tropes a little bit, whereas this I think kind of was a more enjoyable read. And I think Kane's introduction here was quite suitably, you know, kind of like imposing and creepy and all the rest of it.
Well, once we get to the Kane part, and that's very much in the last part of the book, through there, I think it picks back up, you know, to the more of the quality that I was enjoying in Batgirl. Yeah. Before, and I'm excited to get back to Cass, you know?
Yeah, I'm not even sure how the next issue... Yeah, I'm not even sure how the next issue is going to play, because I feel like her getting out of the train means that I suspect there's going to be at least a scene or two, like a full scene in the present day stuff, if we are still doing all the diary. But at the same time, though, the cliffhanger at the end of the diary stuff does make it feel like, oh, we have to continue that as well. So yeah, I'm curious to see what the split next issue is. It's probably still going to be more diary than present day stuff, but I suspect there may be a bit more present day, just because at the very least I expect Cass to talk to Bronze Tiger, and that'll probably at least be a couple of pages. So
yeah, because I also feel like we'll get his side of things too, from his perspective, not just Shiva's, because we were in her journal, right? So we'll get his experience of what it was like and stuff too. So, but yeah, I like when Bronze Tiger and Richard Dragon show up for these little appearances. I think they're a fun duo. I like that side of, you know, it's kind of the 70s DC popping back up.
It took me so long to, like, even once they started calling him Dragon, I was like, who is this asshole? Because Bronze Tiger's someone who shows up more often, and Richard Dragon's like, you know, if Bronze Tiger is like a C or D tier character, then Richard Dragon's an E tier character.
Well, see, and I like him because of his ties to the Question, right? He's the one that trained the Question, you know. So again, I like that side of that 70s DC, you know. But yeah, when it said Richard Javunsky, I was like, oh, okay, that's gotta be Richard Dragon, like that's close. So curious to see where that goes too, because I figure he'll pop back up. He's never too far from Bronze Tiger.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, David Kane, super creep.
Yeah. All right, what are you giving Batgirl? That's next. What are you giving Batgirl, Matt?
I'm giving this a 7.
Yeah. I'll give it a 7 too, but I gave the last issue less. Like I gave the last issue like a 6, I think. So for me, this was a step up. I thought this was better. Admittedly, I am looking forward to being done with the journal stuff. I was hoping it was only a 2-parter because it was like a fill-in little thing before we got the regular artist full-time back. But clearly, it seems like there's going to be at least a little bit more. So, but this was better though, so I'm a bit more hopeful now.